Hello everybody, my name is Zeke, welcome to my channel, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about authors that I really need to read more books from. As a reader, I love going through authors' whole bibliography. Once I get into an author, I like to read their books in quick succession usually, and I think that's very evident. My foremost example, Octavia Butler, who last year I started with, I think, Dawn from the Xenogenesis series, and then just read every single one of her books all in last year. Thoroughly enjoyed that experience. Has become one of my favorite authors, and so I'm no stranger to really reading a lot of books from the same author if I end up enjoying them. So because it went so well for me last year, I really want to, in the future, this year and going forward, focus on reading books from authors that I already know I like. Obviously, not every book I read will be from an author I've already read before. I love trying new things. I love reading new books from authors I've never tried before. But in this video, I just want to talk about some plans I have to read from authors that I have loved in the past. And I plan on talking about, what I've read from them in the past, what I enjoy about their writing, and going forward, what book I'll probably read from them next. So the first author I want to talk about is Toni Morrison, a very well-regarded, very well-renowned author who writes a lot about the Black experience. She writes really, I feel like, character-focused and thematically rich stories about communities and just people finding out more things about themselves, and just really interesting dynamics between characters and explorations of a lot of different themes in a very natural way. That's something I love about her work. I feel like the themes and symbolism, they don't just feel shoehorned in, even though she used a lot of them. They really feel like they are part of the story, and they have this subtlety that I really like. It's not thrown in your face. It is really about the characters, about the story and the characters convey the thematic messaging behind her books. And so I just started reading her in December of last year, and my first book from her was The Bluest Eye, and then I read Song of Solomon and Sula this year. I completely loved all three of them. The Bluest Eye and Sula, I think I gave 5 stars, and Song of Solomon I gave 4.5, but it could have easily been a 5. I think it was just my mood at the time. But just incredible work, literary, moving, emotional, and incredibly well written. And so next, I feel like I have to pick up her probably most famous work, which is Beloved. From my understanding, Beloved, we follow this woman who has escaped from slavery, and she has been out of slavery for a number of years, but she's still haunted by her child who she lost due to the horrors of slavery, and she's trying to make her way in this new life. And I assume, like all of Morrison's work, I know I'm gonna love this, and I just can't wait to get to it soon. Next up, I want to talk about Ruth Ozeki. Ruth Ozeki, I've only read one book from her. I read A Tale for the Time Being last year, and I think Ruth Ozeki, she really divides a lot of people's opinions. I think a lot of her books get mixed reviews just from what I've seen, but I gave this 5 stars last year. It's a very weird story. We basically follow 2 perspectives. One is this young girl who's living in Japan, and she's writing in this diary and telling us all about her life, and there's a lot of really tragic and horrific things that happen to her, but we get this really naive lens that she sees the world through, and it's just a really interesting perspective to follow. And on the other hand, we have the other main character, Ruth, a few years later, or we don't know exactly how much time, I'm not sure. It's been a little while since I read it, but she's living on an island off the coast of Canada, I think, and she is a writer, and she discovers this diary as it washes up on the shore, and she has all these theories about it, and she kind of gets into an obsessive state about this story, and it's just a really interesting story told through these 2 perspectives that I really enjoyed reading, and I thought was very unique and very weird, but in a good way. And so I want to read another book from her, and I think her most recent one was The Book of Form and Emptiness, which, I mean, just from the title, sounds like it'll be pretty strange, and I think it's about a kid who starts hearing voices in his head, and it like kind of corresponds to like traumatic things in his life, but also from the synopsis I read, there's just a lot of weird stuff going on in his life, and like maybe questions of what's real and what's not real. I'm not completely sure, and I don't want to look too much into it because I like to go into books as blind as possible, but I just really want to pick up another one from Ruth Ozeki because I love this one so much. Next, I want to talk about Joan Didion, who I love dearly. She's a author who writes nonfiction and fiction. She writes a lot of personal essays in nonfiction. She's very much known for talking about California in the 60s and 70s, but not all of her work focuses on that. One of her most famous books, which I have read, is The Year of Magical Thinking, which is a nonfiction memoir that chronicles her life in the year after her husband suddenly passes away. She's another author who's very well-renowned, well-regarded in the literary sphere, and my favorite book that I've ever read from her is Play It As It Lays, which is fiction. It's just this story of this woman in crisis in the 60s, and it's really just filled with this energy and this passion that you really find in all of her writing, and she's really good at exploring these characters. She's really good at building atmosphere, and she's really good at just writing in a way that will keep you engaged and keeping you looking forward to what's going to happen next in all of her books. And Play It As It Lays was the first book I read from her, and it was definitely, I think, the best I've read, but I also loved The Year of Magical Thinking, and I've also read two others. I read Run River, which I think was her first fiction, and I also read A Book of Common Prayer. I definitely really liked A Book of Common Prayer. I didn't love Run River. I thought it was kind of bland and boring, but also it's one of her first, so I just want to get to more stuff by her. And since I have read 3 of her fiction, only 1 of her nonfiction, I really want to pick up another one of her nonfiction, memoir, short story, whatever, personal essay collection. So I've heard good things about The White Album. Pretty sure nonfiction, memoir-esque. I don't know exactly what she talks about in it, but I'm sure it'll be good, and that'll probably be the next thing I pick up from her if everything goes to plan. In a similar vein, I want to talk about an author who I just started reading like a week ago. I just read this book from her a week ago, and that's Black Swans by Eve Babbitt. I really want to read more by Eve Babbitt, and I said that a lot in the reading vlog where I read this book, just because this is a collection of short stories, and like Joan Didion, it has that same sort of wit and atmosphere building and personal flair that is present in so much of Didion's writing, but obviously she has her own unique voice and her own unique experiences that she writes about, but it does really remind me a lot of Didion in a lot of ways, especially with discussions of California and that kind of atmosphere. And obviously there are differences, as I said. I don't want to just say they're the same, because they're not, but this is actually a fictionalized short story collection, but she draws a lot from her own experiences, and it really does feel like a collection of personal stories that actually happened. And I just thought it was a really interesting reading experience, and this isn't even one of her most well-known story collections or books, so I really want to read what I think is her most well-known, which is Eve's Hollywood, and I'm just expecting similar levels of good writing and good atmosphere and interesting and engaging topics that are discussed. And I just hope I love that one too, because I really did enjoy this so much. It was such a breath of fresh air, and I really want to read many more things like this in my life. So Eve Babbitt's definitely high on my list. Okay, next is a bit of a more controversial pick, and that's Otesa Moshfag. She's really prominent in like the literary fiction, just general fiction sphere right now. I personally read most of what she's written, but I haven't read 2 things, and one of them is a short story collection, and one of them is her latest book. So I've read McGlue really recently, and this is a short little novella that I thought it's really, really weird. It has a really weird and oppressive writing style, and I think this is really, her first thing she published, and it was pretty good. I don't know, I had some drawbacks with it just because it was so strange, and it was pretty slow, but there's like a purpose to it, so I understood why, and I thought this was a really interesting one. I also read Death in Her Hands, which I enjoyed a lot. I also had some drawbacks with this just because it is so weird, but this one was definitely, I think this is the first one I read by her, and this one's more murder mystery-esque, but in a really subtle way. And then my favorite I've read by her is her most popular, My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which I read last summer, and I get it. A lot of people don't like it because they feel like it's just annoying to read and the main character is annoying and says a lot of problematic things. All of those statements are true, but I think she's just really good at building this atmosphere of this character who you just don't like, but also who you understand in a weird way. And I just think it was really well crafted for what it was. Following this girl who decides that, this young woman who decides she doesn't want to live anymore, basically, and she plans to sleep for an entire year, and so she just takes a bunch of pills and tries to sleep for an entire year. And it's obviously kind of a weird premise, but I think she pulls it off pretty well. And I also read Eileen, which is, I think, maybe her most well-regarded work, and I didn't love it as much, actually. And this is about a prison. There's some weird things that happen in here. It was just okay, but I really want to read her newest book that came out, which is Lapvona, which came out last year. I didn't get it because it was hardcover, and hardcovers are really expensive now, and I wasn't gonna, at that time I'd only really read, I think, Death in Her Hands when it came out, and I just didn't really want to get it yet. And at this point I might as well wait for it to come out in paperback. And I think this one people really didn't like. It's, I think, medieval times, and apparently it's very gruesome and probably unnecessarily so, but that's something that she does, I think, do a lot. She really does not hold back with her descriptions of disgusting things, and I think Miklu, the first novella that I talked about, is really, really evident of that. This whole book is about this man who's been injured, and we don't really hold back anything from it. And I would be interested to read Lapvona just because of my experiences with this book, and maybe having not a similar time period, but also it might not be a similar time period, but having it be in the past and have those same kind of disgusting things going on. I'd just be interesting to see what it is. I really don't even know what it's about. I just heard that it's gross and it takes place in medieval times. So excited to read that. I'll probably end up hating it, just knowing that if I'm excited for it now and people didn't like it, I probably won't like it. But we'll just see how that goes in the future. And I just want to kind of get what all the controversy is because I'm just interested. Okay, that's gonna do it for this video. There are obviously other authors who I've read from and enjoyed in the past who I definitely want to read more from, but these are the main ones. These are the ones that are most stuck on my mind right now and that I definitely want to get to sooner rather than later. Obviously, I hope that all of these go well. The ones I think will go the best are definitely Toni Morrison, Eve Babbitt, and Joan Didion, just because they've all worked really consistently in the past for me. We'll see about the other ones. I'm probably the most hesitant for Lapvona just because I've just heard so many mixed things on it. But we'll see how it all goes, and obviously I'll update in vlogs and wrap-ups in the future, and we'll just see how it goes by then. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please feel free to like, comment, subscribe if you want. I try to post videos once a week. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. I'll see you in the next one.